Truth. Say it, brother.
Truth.
By David Schwinn is the deceptively simple title of an article that we ran in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest, as you can see right there. David is really one of my favorite authors. I say that for a lot of our authors that I cover on the show. It seems like I select a lot of the same people to cover stuff, because it's like some people, you just read their article and you find yourself like, he gets it, you know? I mean, I want to talk about that a little bit more. And I said deceptively simple because, I mean, you'd think that nothing, what's more black and white than truth, right? I mean, it's like, that's pretty simple, but I don't know. I mean, you know, something's either true or it's not is the bottom line. But is that true? Really? Is something either true or not? I mean, there's a time when I would have said yes, you know, something's either true or it's not, but the truth behind truth has become, I think, increasingly difficult to ascertain in this post-truth world of ours. It's been a big term that's been bandied around a lot. And I mean, let's be honest, there's definitely a political approach that I could take to addressing this story, and I actually started with that.
Okay.
But we've been doing a lot of politics in the show, and I was like, maybe I should not take it in that direction. I mean, it's a valid direction, but maybe it's not the one that resonates best and I should talk about. So I really think that even though the subtext in this, I think, is political to a certain extent, I think I want to focus more on the application and importance of the act of truth-seeking within a business context, the context of the organization, right? Specifically our business of quality and quality assurance. For certain, the first duty of anyone having anything to do with quality is to be able to tell what is truly happening in your process, and only in that way can you begin to improve. I mean, you start with the truth, right? I mean, if something's going on, you start with the truth and you go from there. But
what are the facts?
Exactly, that's what you got to start with. But I think you understand that, but then you think a little bit about the mechanics of discovering truth when confronted with a problematic situation, and you start to see how this really lays out. I mean, let's say a process, in this case as an example, that's causing a much higher than expected defect rate. I mean, it's a typical thing, obviously, that any of you out there would look at. Any investigator in that circumstance is first going to gather as much firsthand information as possible. He or she will closely observe the process as it's happening, or perhaps he or she will actually work the process to experience the routines, the behaviors that comprise the specific part of that particular piece of the value stream. I mean, in lean terms, we know that's considered going to the Gemba, or actually being in the Gemba, doing the work is the first thing. But first-hand experience is quickly going to prove a little bit limited, especially if the broken process involves various workstations, different shifts, other facilities across the city or across the world. At some point, the investigator needs to access not only his or her own truth, but the truth about the process as it's perceived by others. So you start to see how things are going to start getting a little tricky here, because even the best intentioned people are generally pretty poor witnesses. I mean, we've seen this, we've read about this many times in the legal setting, where even eyewitnesses are not good witnesses as to what really happened. You're like, you were there, you saw the crime committed, but they don't remember it the way you really want them to. So even those people, like I say, they misremember stuff, or they document poorly, or they mischaracterize what may have occurred. And again, that's well-intentioned people, right? People that are intentionally trying to help you and have the best of intentions in mind. I mean, bad actors can do all that. They can mischaracterize, they can forget, and they also can willfully make false statements, maybe to protect themselves, protect others, or whatever. So, you might say you can maybe circumvent a lot of that with data. I mean, many people out there say, well, sure, but you can always rely on the data, and all you do. I mean, many do, but data really also has its limitations. Even when you can factor in variations for, like I say, shifts and personnel, raw materials, etc., simple data can't always show you the details of the process as it actually occurs, or maybe doesn't occur, as the case may be. And in that case, you find yourself going right back to experiential evidence, either as gathered by yourself or as others. I mean, so the data shows you a piece of what happens, right? But you can't, the data doesn't tell you and doesn't show you what people are doing as the data comes out of that process. So
so you can interpret that data based on your own bias.
It's flat.
If you're seeing part of it.
Exactly. It's so flat. You don't get a three-dimensional view of it. So that's kind of limited too. And there's other issues here for the dedicated truth seeker, even more complex than determining what actually happened. I mean, after evidence is gathered, one must begin to piece it together and interpret what it all means. And in this, like Dirk just mentioned, you run into that trap, the insidious trap of bias. I mean, like truth, bias it's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple concept. I mean, having a bias means that you have a preconceived notion, right? I mean, well, sure, but what do you do when you're not aware of your own bias? I mean, how do you perceive the difference between what you're maybe conditioned to believe versus what your experience has revealed to you over the course of a long and probably a really successful career? I mean, it's not always easy to tell those two things, experience versus bias. I mean, extending that previous example with the little fact-finding tour of the problem with the process, think about maybe a top executive at the company going through that defect-causing process problem analysis. Maybe that executive, maybe he or she came up through the ranks and saw similar problems occur and be solved in certain ways. So it would stand to reason that the executive, if he or she was presented with the problem, would be predisposed to the go-to solutions that he or she found worked in the past. Makes sense. But is that falling back on bias, or is it benefiting from experience? If the investigator of the problem brings the situation, the attention of the executive, will that executive subconsciously reject all potential solutions in favor of the proven cures that worked in the past? And by the way, did those proven cures really cure the issue, or did the problem just go away on its own, or did it morph into something else? Is it still going on in a slightly different way? Is that what's causing the problem that you're investigating now? It's really hard to tease out all those strands of truth and what truth is. You see how this is deceptively simple. Now I'm taking this to a different place than Schwinn did, but I mean, I think it's valid to question the nature of things like perception and bias and truth in this way. I mean, it's important for us to consider not only as quality professionals, but I think, and I'm going to go back to the politics of this a little bit, but as fully functioning members of society. I mean, use your critical thinking. I mean, we got to do our best to not only discover what's true, but to be conscious of our own internal mental pathways to that discovery. I mean, it's only when we are aware of how we came to a conclusion and why that we can really make decisions that make sense for us and for the world and for our companies. But you have to be aware of the pathways that brought you to the decision, and try to be conscious of your biases, of your experiences, of your perceptions, of what people are telling you that may have good or ill will towards you and towards your fact finding.
Well, I think even if you aren't, and this has been talked about a lot, especially recently, even if you aren't aware of your own biases,
right?
If you make an effort to look at data or look at research or look at news items or whatever you want, depending on the context, if you're willing to look at sources of information other than the ones you normally go to, and be open to actually reading them and thinking about them, that can help to combat any bias that you might. It may not completely do away with it, but if you expose yourself to other people's ideas, to other people's perceptions of a problem or a situation, then you're better off than always going to your go-to source for talking always to the same engineer. Going to the same newspaper all the time, whatever, listening to the same talk show, whatever.
It's known as the echo chamber. I mean, that's
it's the echo chamber, right? So if you get
use.
out of that echo chamber, if you're willing to listen to some other engineer that you don't normally talk to, somebody who normally has a contrary opinion, if you do that, you may gain some more insight. You may still disagree, but you're going to gain some more insight and maybe help to combat that bias and get a little bit closer to maybe what the real truth is.
You have to force yourself to do it.
You do have to force, and nobody likes to do that.
No, it is. It's interesting because there's been a lot of studies lately about this idea about reinforcing truth and why we as humans want to seek out things that prove what we think is true versus discarding what we don't. There's a lot of tribalism that goes into that too. So it's a challenging issue.